everyone. Welcome to Southern Ghost Stories, where we talk about some of the most haunted places in the South. I'm your host, Chelsea, along with Alan.
Hello.
So today we're talking about the Sorrel Weed House in Savannah, Georgia. This place is not only one of the most haunted places in the South, but one of the most haunted places in the entire country. Featured on Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunter, many people have experienced being pushed, bitten, having unexplained orbs and shadows in their picture, and so much more, which we'll get into a little bit later. An interesting note on the house was also used as a high vantage point for the opening scene in Forrest Gump. Remember that feather floating through the Savannah sky at the very beginning of the film? Well, that was on top of the Sorrel Weed House. Now, before we get into all the haunted stuff, it's important to know the background and the history of the house first. Alan, creator of the Savannah Ghost Map app, will go over some of the house's past.
Absolutely. The Sorrel Weed House has a tragic history from both the American Revolution as well as some personal tragedies that took place on the premises. The house, as well as Madison Square, is actually where the siege of Savannah took place, and that was considered the second most deadliest battle in the American Revolution. British forces captured Savannah in 1778 and established a military base where both the Sorrel Weed House and Madison Square sits today. However, a coalition of the French Navy, the Continental Army, and volunteers from Haiti attacked the British base. Unfortunately, it didn't work out very well for them. In fact, the French, American, and Haitian forces lost over 1,000 men, while the British only lost 50 during the battle. With that many lives lost, it's no wonder the Sorrel Weed House is so haunted. It's built right on top of where the battle was. Another important aspect of the house's history would be Francis Sorrel. He was originally born in Haiti as Francois Sorrel. His father was a colonel in the French army, and his mother was a biracial free woman. Unfortunately, his mother died shortly after Francois was born. After she died, the Haitian Revolution began and the country was in turmoil. It was during this time that Francois's father sent him to Port-au-Prince to live with his mother's family to get away from the revolting slaves and the violence that ensued. As Francois got older, he began working with Henry and George Douglas. They were coffee and sugar traders that were based in America. They eventually brought Francois over to Baltimore to work in their offices. Francois relished the fresh start and learned English. He also shed all ties to his past and changed his name to Francis. The brand new Francis Sorrel began passing himself off as a white man. And this was doable because he actually had fair skin. Francis was eager to become one of Savannah's elite and was well on his way when he made his way to Savannah in the early 1800s. It was here that Francis would get into advertising with his old friend Henry Douglas. He would also become an exporter of cotton, tobacco, sugar, and even slaves. Not only was Francis thriving as a businessman, his social life was also flourishing as well. In 1822, he married Lucinda Moxley. Lucinda was a beautiful 17-year-old who was a niece of his business partner, Henry Douglas. She also came from a very wealthy family who owned a lot of land in Virginia, some of which would now belong to Francis. Unfortunately, during the 1820s, yellow fever ravaged Savannah and killed thousands, including Lucinda. In 1829, Francis married Lucinda's younger sister, Matilda. This, of course, entitled Francis to even more of the Moxley money and fertile land along the Potomac River in Virginia. It's a poorly kept secret that both of his marriages were out of convenience, and Francis was more about accruing wealth and maintaining his social status than finding true love. Francis had a total of 8 children, 3 with Lucinda and 5 with Matilda. Unfortunately, 3 of Matilda's children died before the age of 6. With his marriages more about money than love, neither Francis nor his wives were happy, especially Matilda. She battled depression after losing 3 children. She also knew her marriage was a sham, and the fact that she had to raise her sister's children as well as her own probably really weighed upon her. This brings us into our first theory as to why the Sorrel Weed House is considered so haunted.
There are quite a few different people and theories on who the Sorrel Weed House is haunted by and why. One of the most important and popular theories would be a ghost named Molly who supposedly haunts the Carriage House. It's rumored that Molly was in an intimate relationship with Francis Sorrel, but it's not known if this relationship was consensual or not, since she was also a slave to the family. She was said to be very close to Matilda as well and considered a friend. Because of her relationships with both Francis and Matilda, she lived in the Carriage House so she could be closer to the family. The most popular theory about Molly's death is that Matilda saw Molly with her husband. Matilda was so distraught by this betrayal that she threw herself off the balcony and died. Molly was later found hanging in the Carriage House. One theory is that she felt so guilty that she killed herself, but another theory is that she was murdered by an angry Francis who blamed her for the death of his wife. Whichever is true, it's a tragic ending nonetheless. There is some controversy around this theory, however. During the time of Matilda's death, the Sorrel family was said to be living next door in the townhouse that Francis also built for them. But there are also documents showing that Francis met with Robert E. Lee at the Sorrel Weed House in 1859. So were they living in their townhouse next door or the actual Sorrel Weed House? Did she jump off the second floor balcony onto the below courtyard at the Sorrel Weed House? Or did she jump through the second story window at their new townhouse? You can imagine the confusion surrounding Matilda's death. Perhaps another theory is more likely. A less mentioned theory is that Matilda found out about her husband's heritage. If information about his mulatto mother was exposed, Matilda's social status in Savannah would be ruined. Social status was everything to Matilda. It had been drilled into her by her well-to-do mother and father. Some have speculated that Matilda could have even received a letter from one of her husband's family members in Haiti, and then discovered the secret he had been hiding for over 40 years. Now, Alan, didn't you say that you found out some interesting information about Molly?
Yes, we do know Molly existed. She was a real person who was a slave that lived on the property at one time. There are reports of Francis Sorrel sending a slave named Molly to New York from Savannah in 1857. It's not known whether or not she returned, but it is documented proof of Molly having ties to Francis and his family and living there at the house.
That is interesting, and it does give credence to the fact that these theories could be true about Molly, since we do know she's a real person. Was she around during these tragedies? Now that we may never know.
Well, Chelsea, it's also worth mentioning that in 2017, extensive excavations were done in the basement of the Carriage House by a team from Armstrong State University. An impression had formed in the floor, and the group from Armstrong State was brought in to find out if Molly or someone had been buried there under the Carriage House. After months of digging and researching, it was determined that the settling was not due to graves. Bones were found, but they were bones from small animals that were likely cooked and eaten there on the property. The research team also determined that the Carriage House was likely built in the 1880s, 20 years after Matilda took her own life. This gives the theory about Matilda finding out about Francis Sorrel's heritage a little more credibility. It could also mean that she became depressed for another reason altogether.
Thanks, Alan. Matilda and Molly's tragedy, however, is not the only tragedy that has taken place in the home. It's also rumored that the youngest child of Francis and his first wife, Lucinda, also named Francis Sorrel, practiced medicine in the home's basement. It's thought that many of his patients that didn't survive might be lingering around in the basement. Lastly, we can't forget about all the soldiers who died during the siege of Savannah, which took place where the Sorrel Weed House now sits today.
While touring the house at night, the parlors are a popular spot where the guys will stop and they'll tell you stories about the family and point out furniture and some of the things in the room. They'll also point out the mirrors. The ghost of Matilda Sorrel likes to hang out in the ladies' drawing room. Sometimes if you take a picture, you might be able to capture her in the background in the mirror. People often take pictures in the room, only discover later an awkward Matilda Sorrel standing off to the side in a long black dress while a group of tourists wearing shorts and flip-flops stand unknowingly beside her. She really sticks out. A tall, lanky man in period attire has also been known to reside in the men's parlor. Like Matilda, he has been captured in pictures and sometimes spotted on the tour. No one really knows who he is, but there's speculation that he is a soldier who lost his life in the siege of Savannah. Some visitors have reportedly smelled cigar smoke in the room. Considering that the Sorrel Weed House does not allow smoking, this is very, very strange.
In addition to the parlors, the basement supposedly has a lot of activity. As we mentioned earlier, Francis and Matilda's son, Dr. Francis Sorrel, practiced medicine in the basement, and some believe that many of his patients are still there, as people who have toured the basement have mentioned seeing shadow people. When they do ghost tours of the basement at night, they turn out all the lights and it gets really dark down there. People have claimed to have been pushed, they've been scratched or poked. Some have been touched or felt their hair being pulled. Some people have claimed to feel nauseous overall. It's a really spooky feeling. I will say that when I was down there, I was genuinely uncomfortable. Nothing happened to me. I didn't experience anything. There was just an overwhelming fear of not knowing what was going on. I felt like at any moment something could happen. People have also claimed to see apparitions of soldiers in the basement, actual soldiers who disappear at a second glance.
I had a strange experience in the basement of the Sorrel Weed House. We were taking a tour, and of course it's pitch black. There was a guide alongside myself, Chelsea, and 10 or 15 other people just walking around in the dark looking for a ghost. We had a ghost meter, and it was supposed to detect strange electronic anomalies that were supposed to have been ghosts. Well, I was walking around the basement, and I made my way over to an area in the corner, and I found a chair. I held my ghost meter over it, and all of a sudden it started going off. Lights were flickering and going off and on, so I pulled it away, and the lights stopped. They turned themselves off. I held it back over the chair, and the lights started going on and off again. I thought it was really strange, so I went and grabbed the guide. I explained to her what was going on, so she got her ghost meter and held it over the chair like I did. And it didn't do anything. I put my ghost meter over the chair, and nothing. I'm not sure if there was anything there initially, but whatever it was, it wanted to make me look silly in front of the guide. I just can't explain why it would go off twice, then 30 seconds later when I had the ghost meter in the same spot, nothing happened.
Yeah, that is really strange. So the last place to note would be the Carriage House, which supposedly experiences the most paranormal activity compared to any other place on the property. People who tour the Carriage House report problems with their cell phones and other electronics on the second floor. Phones that are fully charged upon entering the Carriage House have been found dead after only 30 minutes. Now, Alan, didn't you experience some issues when we toured the Carriage House a while back?
Yeah, in 2016, I had a very weird experience with my phone that I had never had happen before. I've had an iPhone since 2008, and I still have one today. What happened that day at the Sorrel Weed House has never ever happened to me. We went to the Carriage House and climbed the stairs to go up to the second floor. When we got upstairs, we walked 20 or 30 feet to the room where Molly supposedly lived and died. I got my phone out and began to shoot a video of us just walking around. I called out and said, "Is anybody in here? Does anyone want to talk to me?" Now, as I was saying this, my phone froze. I could not zoom in or out. It was stuck. All I could see was just weird squiggly lines. This was really strange, so I stopped it and played it back. You could see us walking into Molly's room and hear me talking to whatever was in there, and then went back to squiggly lines. The strangest part was that you could still hear my voice, but the picture was just stuck. I'll never be able to explain what happened that day.
You know, I look back at what happened that day in the Carriage House, and I remember that my phone was actually dead. But again, my phone is always dead, so that could just be my fault. Who knows? But strange stuff like that just happens.
While we were on a tour, I spoke to a man who worked in the house. He was actually an on-site historian. I asked him if he had ever experienced anything strange or if anything weird ever happened to him. Well, he told me a story about a time when renovations were going on. Like most old houses, the Sorrel Weed House requires a lot of repairs and upkeep. And for a while, the Sorrel Weed House was being renovated in 2016. He told me that one day while workers were in and out, he went outside and just took a smoke break. As he was outside enjoying the sunshine, he heard a loud noise, and he also heard the muffled sound of people talking inside the building. He didn't think much of it until he heard another very loud noise. He put his cigarette out and walked back into the house. He walked around room by room, through the men's parlor, to the ladies' drawing room, then to the dining room. No one was there. He told me he never could figure out where those voices or loud noises come from.
You know, there are a lot of strange stories surrounding the Sorrel Weed House, and these are just a few of them. Now, if you'd like to encounter your own experience, the Sorrel Weed House does offer tours both day and night. If you want to see the house and learn some of the history, then the day tours are great. And if you're looking for more of a ghost experience, then the night tour would definitely be something you would want to check out. We enjoyed going to both. You do get a lot of different information on each tour, so you should look into doing both if you have the time. Savannah is an amazing place to go, and the Sorrel Weed House is just one of a kind. So we hope you enjoyed hearing all about the Sorrel Weed House. If you would like to learn more about the house, check out our book, Southern Ghost Stories, Historical Hauntings, or visit our website, southernghoststories.com. Also, if you plan on visiting Savannah and want to take your own customized haunted tour, download the Savannah Ghost Map app in iTunes and Google Play.
Please feel free to leave us a comment or send a message to our Facebook or Instagram accounts. Let us know about any creepy experiences you may have had. Also, please give us some ideas on which locations you'd like to hear us talk about in future shows. Be sure to subscribe and check back with us next week as we discover Cragfont, one of the most haunted places in Tennessee.
It's also rumored that the youngest child of Francis... Betty.
All right, let's take a break.
No, I'm going to get this. It's also rumored that the youngest child of Francis and his first wife, Lucinda, also named Francis Sorrel. I don't understand why I can't get through this. It's thought that many of his patients that didn't survive might be lingering around in the basement. Lastly, you know why I stopped it? The basement.
The Sorrel Weed House has a tragic history from both the American Revolution as well as some personal tragedy. Yeah. Okay.
I don't know why that made me giggle so much. Okay.
Francis was... Dun, dun, dun. It's worth noting